Welcome everybody to the community conversations and just updating on our Doctors Alliance. And Dr. Young, you're both a commissioner with the ITNJ as well as part of this Doctors Alliance through the World Health Sovereignty Summit. And we're getting a lot of great feedback from people that are going on to the website. So you can access the 4 hours, which you are part of. And we're actually turning it into a condensed community screening, and we'll be reaching out to you, Dr. Young, for more contributions and ongoing. I know that you submitted some documents to Sacha to look over it and just updates on what's happening with COVID. And I don't need a further introduction to Sacha or to tell him what questions to ask you, because he's always overflowing with those. So I will pass
actually, Robert very kindly helped me prepare the questions today, so we've got some very good questions.
Oh, good. Yes, he was giving me some introduction to those too. So thank you, Robert, and thank you, Sacha. With that, I'll pass it over to both of you. Now, Sacha just put on his glasses, Dr. Young, so that would be an indicator.
All right. There we go.
No, put him on, Sacha. He was telling me why he had his glasses on, and so I'm like, I should go get mine. So anyway, thank you both, and I'll pass it over to both of you to give some feedback on what's going on in the world from your point of view, Dr. Young.
Thank you, Imani. Hi, Robert. Good to see you again.
Hi, Sacha. Good to see you too.
Well, a lot of questions here, and I'm really thrilled that you and I got a chance to kind of ping pong there, because you've got such an epic brain, such a formidable scope of wisdom and knowledge. And I have to say that people, the feedback from the last talk we did, Dr. Young, was quite extraordinary. I'm thrilled that people got it. And mostly people were saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. This, finally, I understand what's going on. That's the first time I've been able to understand what this Corona COVID-19 theater is all about. And that was up the point of our previous talk. So this talk, we're going to just drill a little bit more into the sort of generic background connected to health, wellness, medicine, science, and the scope of things. So if you don't mind, we'll jump right in, Robert. We are told we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. We went some way in the last conversation to explain and explore what that pandemic looked like, how real it was to some great extent. But the question here is, what can people do to protect themselves in this worldwide pandemic?
Yeah, well, an excellent question. And I think there's a lot of messages out there to, kind of calm the fears, and fear does play a part in this, and you have to catch yourself, because when you're in fear or worried about, you have uncertainty, that fear is basically false evidence, which seems to be appearing real to you, but reality it's not. And so what I have to do when I start wondering about things or fearing something that I don't have 100% certainty about, I have to pull myself back and start focusing on the opposite of fear, which is faith. And faith is an acronym that I've coined. Of faith is the first attribute in thinking healthy. And when we start putting faith in things that we don't understand completely, as we gain more knowledge, that fear does dissipate. But to stay in fear, it's been said that if you take 20 people that are suffering from any sickness and disease, the fear of that disease will kill 19 of them out of 20. And there's actually biology around that. The biology is that when you're thinking about something, that requires energy. When you're using energy in the form of electrons, because that's what our body uses, we're electrical beings having a physical experience, but we produce chemical waste. And so when we're thinking about something or overthinking about something, kind of like having a thought attack about something, in fact, 80% of all heart attacks are caused by thought attacks. And we're just in our head. It requires a tremendous amount of energy to process it. And when you're processing something, that's a metabolic function. And a metabolic function always produces acidic waste that, if not properly eliminated through the 4 channels of elimination, women have 5, men have 4. So you have defecation, urination, perspiration, and respiration. And of course, women have menstruation. That's why I suggest they're able to live longer, because they have more orifices for detoxifying. But the bottom line is we need to find some faith and belief that rather than just suggesting walking down that road of uncertainty. So fear does play a part in it.
Well, let me jump in there, if I may. We are electrical beings. I love that. We're also beings with a tremendous capacity to imagine and to create through the imagining. So what you're simply saying is that where thought moves, the body follows, and it's such a tremendous truism that we are capacitors of limitless energy. And what we place our attention or project plasma toward is ultimately what manifests. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely. When we understand that we eat food, that we absorb photons of light that are converted by the eyes. In fact, our eyes are very sensitive. It picks up that light. It picks up the electrical fields, the magnetic fields. That's why I'm wearing glasses, not because I need glasses, because I can see you either way. These are I actually wear these to protect myself from ultra blue wavelengths that can destroy the rods and cones of the eyes, because our eyes are very, very sensitive. My eyes are very sensitive, and so I've been putting this on to prevent any sort of damage to the eyes. So that's why I'm wearing the glasses as a protection. But when we understand that our body does not run on carbohydrates, it doesn't run on protein, it doesn't run on fats, it runs on electrons, or these little pieces of energy that are transported on a matrix of sodium. That's why our blood is salted. One of the best ways to prevent sickness and disease, and what emergency or critical care doctors do, is they immediately hook you up to an IV of saline. It's a 0.9% saline solution of sodium chloride. It's not water, it's salt water. And the reason why they put salt into the body, at least the reason that I have determined that they do this, is to allow the transport of electrons through the sodium ion to transport energy to all the various cells that make up your organs and organ systems. So it's, in other words, your body functions in salt water. Our cells swim in salt water. And when we delete sodium, we delete one of the major elements that the body needs, foundational elements to protect our health. So
I want to jump in again quickly, because you keep raising vital points, and I want to contextualize for people. Why then have governments essentially, certainly since the Second World War, been in the health administration sector and the agricultural sector, the food sector? Why have they focused on this notion that sugars should be pumped into every product on the supermarket shelves, even by stealth, and sodium is the bad one? We need to lower salt, cholesterol, sodium. What's going on there?
Can you say population control? I don't know. I mean, how can does it create more business for big pharma? I mean, what is the alternative motive? Because sugar is a waste product of metabolism. It's one of the wastes that the body's trying to get rid of. I mean, what happens when blood sugars go high? How do you feel? Do you feel lightheaded? Do you feel dizzy? What if the blood sugars go low? See, so we've been programmed to think that our brain runs on sugar, and it's absolutely incorrect. Our brains are electrical. They run on electrons. Sugar is a waste product. In fact, the newest system that is now being taught in medical school is called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic functions during REM sleep. The brain literally shrinks and like a sponge squeezes out its waste to be dumped into the lymphatic system to be eliminated through the 4 or 5 channels of elimination. So if that didn't happen, that's why rest is so important. If we don't get adequate rest, our body can't go into that deep sleep to where the brain can then release all of its waste products and have it through the lymphatic system, release that into the lymphatic system, which is the sewer system of the body, to then pump that out through the pores of the skin or through urination. And so, this idea that our bodies run on sugar is absolutely false. Let's take a banana, for example. What happens to a banana? Well, when you first see a banana come forth, it's green in color. And anyone who's tasted a green banana knows that they are not sweet. But what happens to a banana is the same thing that happens to the human body. As it ages, it becomes sweeter and sweeter. Now, I mean, not in terms of personality, but in terms of chemistry. In other words, glucose becomes a problem, and it's a huge problem in the world. We are totally being told we need sugar for this, we need sugar for energy. If you pass out in a plane or at an amusement park, because of either low or high blood sugar, saying, well, we need to give you a dose of sugar. So, eat this banana or eat this sweet fruit. And the bottom line, that's exactly the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. We're actually supposed to be spraying salt in the mouth, drinking salty water to provide, the release of electrons or the transport of electrons. When you have salt in the body, then energy flows. When you don't, it doesn't. There's a great video that I did, a demonstration. It's called Will It Light? It's on YouTube, Will It Light? And I show I take just plain water and I put salt in it. Then I put my electrode in and it lights up the light bulb. If I then put sugar in it, it turns the light out. So what happens with a banana is it ages, it gets its aging spots on its skin, those little black things, and it becomes sweeter and sweeter, and it becomes to a point where you can't even eat the banana, so you make banana bread out of it. That's what my mother used.
It loses its capacitance, essentially.
Yeah, because it's deteriorating, it's rotting. So think of aging as a fermentation process. As we age, wrinkles and age spots, these are all the blemishes that come from within with waste products that aren't properly being eliminated. So we don't get old, we mold. And the way we protect ourselves, like we protect our food, we put it in a proper environment. Whether you're dealing with COVID or whether you're dealing with any type of respiratory condition, theoretically viral or non-viral, cancer, whatever the condition is, the key is for energy to flow. And salt becomes the number one protection that you have against any sickness or disease. Right. And I recommend between 13 to 15 grams a day based upon 150 pounds or 72 kilograms to protect yourself. So you may have to be taking more or less, but your body will tell you. But if you crave salt, the body's crying out for it. It's not crying out for sugar. And this is also evidence to the truth of what I'm talking about. When you crave something sweet, take some water, put some salt in it. Now, not just any salt, Himalayan salt, pink salt. We have a flavor salt, which is a 30% concentration of sodium chloride. Spray it in your mouth, put it in water, drink it. And within less than 1 minute, rather than taking that cup of coffee to wake up, in less than a minute, your energies, you'll actually start your engine, so to speak. Electrons will start flowing and you'll feel incredibly well without getting a caffeine high. Salt is the best way to overcome that addiction or that particular acid. And we, Sacha, we all have our favorite acids. It's like, what are Dr. Young's acids, that he prefers? Well, I grew up with pumpkin pie. So on Thanksgiving, I have pumpkin pie because it's a tradition. Does it have eggs in it? No, but you can make a dairy-free pie. So I've made modifications even in my own life to do those kinds of things that I did when I was growing up, when my parents really didn't have the kind of information that we have now. How do you protect yourself? You protect yourself by, one, managing and maintaining the alkaline design of the fluids of the body. Alkalining, and you have to maintain that alkalinity. And we're not just talking about blood fluids, which tries to do that by itself by pushing out waste into the interstitial fluids, which I just published a paper on talking
we're
about.
Talk about that later. I'm going
Yeah.
to raise.
But when energy flows, it flows in a matrix of salt. Now on the spiritual side, if you take salt out of the equation, the spirit will leave the body. That's why they use it in the hospital. I've asked nurses, not that I don't know the answer. I said, why are you using saline with this patient? We just brought them in from the emergency room. And they'll say, well, if we don't use saline, the patient will die. Right. If you don't use salt, the patient will die. Now, on the other hand, someone says, well, the question is, well, Dr. Young, if I take salt, my blood pressure goes up. That's not a salt problem. That's a circulation problem. You got to circulate to percolate. So because of the sugar, which is sticky, right? It holds everything together. It causes cells to stick together, causing pathological blood coagulation. Salt doesn't do that. So when you take the sugar out and put the salt in, you can improve circulation. As you improve circulation, you improve elimination of your waste, because while I'm talking here, I'm producing acidic waste. And that can come out through my breath, or it can come out through my pores of my skin. So there's different orifices to allow these gases or these waste products to be dispersed. If not, if there's no way to eliminate it, they get held in the interstitial fluid compartments of the interstitium, which is the largest organ of the human body.
Yeah.
And that's what's uniquely new. But the last thing I want to say about salt is the glue that holds the spirit body inside the physical body. When you cut the salt, you begin to die. It may be slowly or it may be suddenly. So if you want to stay in your body, if you enjoy your life, you have to include that primary element of saline, in order to hold that soul together. A soul is two dissimilar ingredients, a spirit body and a physical body that have joined together into one to become a soul. And to be a complete soul, salt is foundational to maintaining good health physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually.
Okay, what is true immunity, and how can we stay healthy from any sickness or disease?
That's a great question. If you ask 10 people, 9 out of 10 wouldn't even know what that means. Okay, in the last 40 years, I've been studying the blood, watching two different classifications of white blood cells. One classification is called granulocyte. The other classification is agranulocytes. Well, the granulocytes make up 2/3 of the entire white count. These are called neutrophils. I've watched their behavior for now close to 40 years. Their behavior is to move like amoebas in and through the cells, clean the cell membranes, clean up what is in the environment. Like, let's say you ate some peanuts or some almonds. Within less than a few minutes, you'll see almond particulates, fragments of that almond or peanut in the blood. And you'll see that peanuts and almonds activate a response. The response is from the garbage collectors. Now, we have this notion that white blood cells are soldiers of an army that are waiting there, to attack any incoming invaders. That is completely a false premise. It's not waiting at all. What they're doing is, in an analogy, it's like a swimming pool. A swimming pool has, if you have someone to take care of it, or if you're taking care of it, you have sweeps and brooms and vacuums. Those vacuums are like the granulocytes. They're like the neutrophils, trying to pick up or clean up or vacuum biologicals. So if you take a vaccine, you're getting some biologicals. What does the neutrophil do? It goes around and tries to pick up RNA and DNA fragments. That's what it does. Does it destroy them? No, it picks them up. What? To take it to the dump, to take it to the elimination organs. The other part of that is the swimming pool maintenance person wants to keep the swimming pool in an alkaline state, because if the pH drops, all kinds of critters start showing up, bacteria, algae, and what have you. You have to clean the pool every day. So that's a different type of white blood cell. They're called lymphocytes. There's different categories of lymphocytes. Lymphocytes release oxygen species in the form of reduced oxygen, like H- or OH-. They're called free radicals, or reactive oxygen toxic species. What they're releasing is an electron to neutralize an acid, which is a proton. So lymphocytes are the chemical protection against any sort of poison. So if you're taking in, let's say, a poison, let's say you're producing too much lactic acid because you're over-exercising, or you're getting it from your dairy diet, or you're getting, let's say, from a vaccine, you're getting formaldehyde, which is an acid. Well, the lymphocytes will release oxygen species, reduced oxygen, to neutralize that, because opposites attract. You've got a poison, which is an acid, and you've got a base, which are these oxygen species that are being released to neutralize each other. So that's what the immune system does, which is really not true immunity. True immunity, to keep the white cells at peace, is to maintain internal cleanliness, to deal with the toxicity within. How do you do that? You do that by changing what you eat, what you drink, what you breathe, what you think, what you feel, what you believe, your lifestyle, your diet, and how it causes internal filth or intoxication.
Okay.
So it's not about treating any specific disease. So how can I support true immunity? Is maintain the alkaline design of the body fluids, the blood.
I love the fact that you bring belief in equiproportionate to nutrition. I think that's very profound. When we start to see nutrition and belief pretty much at the same level, we begin to understand how we can transmute any situation. I think that's wonderful. What is flu, for instance, bringing it to the layman's language, what is flu, influenza, and SARS, which everyone understands, and what are they symptoms or diseases?
Well, excellent question. Is a flu a disease? Absolutely not. It's a symptom. What is the body doing? It's increasing the temperature to increase circulation that opens up the pores of the skin to remove a buildup of acidic waste, okay, or biologicals out through the pores of the skin. So a flu is a symptom of protection. Your fever goes up in order to protect the alkaline design of the fluids, because it's trying to protect the cell membranes. So how do I get rid of this? If you don't exercise, and if you're, here again, you don't get sick, you're kind of doing sick with what you eat, and it's happened seasonal, because you seem to, people seem to be during the winter months hibernating. And when you're hibernating, you're probably not getting enough sunlight, you're not getting enough exercise. There's lots of reasons, but probably the worst one is during that seasonal time, you're drinking more alcohol, you're eating more acidic foods, pork and fish. You're creating more acidic filth inside the body. So in America, it's Halloween, Thanksgiving, then Christmas, and then we cap this whole thing with New Year's, and then we say, oh, I just caught the flu, or I have lung congestion.
Wow, that's seasonal flu, huh? Right there.
Yeah, so the seasonal flu is nothing more than I eat too much crap disease.
Wow.
Or I'm worried about it. Financially, you may have stresses during that seasonal time where you don't have the resources that you may feel required to perform, but you can't perform the way you want to. So that becomes an internal stress. And that's a belief system.
Very good. So let me ask you, I mean, this is brilliant. This is so interesting. So COVID, presumably, is therefore seasonal as well. And if you've got 5 billion people lurching around with masks on their faces under the edict of the Public Health Administration sector, presumably with that 15, 16, 17% depletion in oxygen intake, you have an automatic 16, 17% depletion in autoimmunity. And what is the palpable outcome or effect, therefore, of COVID? And is it a seasonal phenomenon? Are we going to see the second wave because we were so poorly administrated by the public health sector with the first wave?
Well, first, second, and third waves are just waves of, hey, I'm sick, so I kind of slowed down on what I'm eating and drinking that's not healthy. I'm starting to take more concern about my body. I'm starting to drink more water, et cetera, et cetera. The wave begins when we start feeling overconfident with our health and we start going back to that chocolate, going back to that black tea, going back to coffee, going back to cigarettes, going back to drugs. And these are all contributing factors. Then you lap on top of that, the air pollution of carbon monoxide, the fact then you wear a mask, which doesn't protect you because here again, the pores within that mask would need to disallow anything below 0.1 to 0.001 millimicrons. And there's no mask unless you've got one of those, that headgear, looks like you're from an astronaut.
That's coming next. I mean, there are people in restaurants in Asia now serving with those hazmat helmets on.
Well, that's the only protection. I mean, if you look at the N95 mask, for example, it was designed for polluted air. So it doesn't let anything in. But here again, it doesn't protect anybody on the outside because it lets everything you're breathing, it lets it out.
Right.
Okay. So if you're concerned about sneezing, N95 won't work because it's already suggesting the mask was designed to not let pollution in, but it lets pollution out. So the masks really don't do it, and they do prevent, the release of carbon dioxide, CO2, which if left into the blood, if it can't relieve itself, will cause pulmonary embolisms, will cause disseminated intravascular coagulation. And those are big words for blood cells that are coagulating together that cannot circulate into the pulmonary system, dump its waste, not just carbon dioxide, but other toxins, dump its waste, and then pick up new oxygen to, feed the cells.
Are you describing exosomes here?
Well, exosomes are released when the cell membrane begins to deteriorate. It's a defensive mechanism. When I published my paper on HIV and AIDS many years ago, it finally got published in 2016. It's actually a very large document, so it's in 3 parts, part 1, 2, and 3. But I refer to exosomes as repair proteins. So when there is damage to the endothelium, which is the protective lining of your blood vessel, when there's damage to the cell membrane, the cells release compounds like glutathione, but it also releases a protein called an exosome. And if you look at the exosomes that are being mine or others that are being photographed using electron microscopy, they're all identical. There may be slight DNA RNA, I should say, RNA or DNA changes within that. But here again, exosomes are created endogenously in response to an acidic environment that's damaging the cell membrane as a form of protection. So HIV is an exosome, theoretically. I mean, because there has not been any true gold standard identification of HIV.
But you can contract it, right?
No, you can't.
You can't.
You can't. No. Rock Hudson's lover, for example, was not HIV positive. Here again, it depends on your circulation and elimination. It depends on, are you managing and maintaining the alkaline design of your internal fluids? Let me give you an example. If you take seeds and throw them in soil, will they grow if you water them? If you take seeds and throw them on concrete or asphalt, will they grow? Well, it's highly unlikely. So the terrain is everything. The germ is nothing. So the terrain is responsible for what then expresses itself. If you have an acidic lifestyle and diet, then you'll express acidic and lifestyle diet symptomologies. There are no specific diseases. I want to say that again. There are no specific diseases. There's only specific disease symptomologies. For example, cancer is a disease not of the cells, but of the fluids. SARS is not a disease of the cells, but of the fluids. What is the acid? The acid is an increase of lactic acid. And all those that we have tested with a degenerative or infectious disease have high levels of citric and lactic acid in their body fluids. And it's not just vascular, we're talking about intracellular fluids. When we eliminate those acids, through mediating through an alkaline lifestyle and diet and alkalizing supplementations, we reduce lactic acid or acid loads, the symptoms go away. So if you go even back to this whole game, well, what was causing HIV? HIV was associated with the use of some specific drugs. One of those drugs in the homosexual environment was called poppers. Okay, these poppers or relactants, they create an acidic environment that causes the release of exosomes.
Wow.
So when we're talking about polio, what was causing polio? Was it a virus? No, it was not a virus. It was DDT poisoning.
Right.
What was causing Zika? Glycophosphates. Why are we seeing an increase in post-polio? Because of glyphosate. We're talking about pesticides, herbicides, insecticides within our food that poison our environment, which then causes the release of exosomes as a form of protection.
Ebola?
Ebola is the same thing. Yeah, so if we're talking about Ebola or hantavirus,
bovine flu, swine flu, avian flu.
all of these may include biologicals, but have not gone through the gold standard to determine their virulency. Have they isolated the virus, the polio virus? No. Have they isolated HIV? No. Have they then injected it into an animal to produce the same symptoms that are shown in those symptomatic patients that are expressing similar? It's called monkey business. In 1999, the government stopped funding monkey business because they couldn't determine the connection between HIV and immune deficiency.
Right.
And so that line was cut. So they had to look for something else. What is this? Okay, so we have to come up with some theory. Well, people have just stopped talking about HIV, but the problem's still the same. If I'm dealing with someone who's been diagnosed with SARS or diagnosed with HIV or has polio-like symptoms, these symptoms are not what we treat. We treat the environment because the symptom is an expression of the internal environment. And what's the internal environment? It's vascular, it's interstitial, it's intracellular. And for those who have diseases within their body cavities where fluid's not coming out through the elimination organs, Then we have peritoneal diseases, where they're actually retaining fluids in the body cavities. And this is what causes the bloating. But that's all end stage stuff that leads to sepsis.
All right.
Did you know, Sacha, that the number one cause of disease or dis-ease, not disease, but dis-ease, the symptom is sepsis. And sepsis is the poisoning of the body fluids. It's then breaking down the cells. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people every month dying from this. Over 100,000 a month. Nobody talks about it because they don't know the pathology of it. But it's just another stage of symptomologies showing how the environment, what is our environment? The internal fluids, which is 60% of our body is fluid. That fluid has been compromised with chemicals, acidic waste from what we eat, what we drink, what we breathe, what we think, what we feel, and what we believe. All of these chemicals have accumulated in compartments called the interstitial fluid, interstitium compartments, to be deposited into the fatty tissues. It's the answer to the question is, why do people get fat? People get.
Forgive me. I want to bring it back to the shotgun question: is COVID a virus or an exosome?
It's identical to HIV, which is an exosome. So COVID is actually a response to an acidic condition. It's not a disease, it's a symptom. The symptoms of fever, dry cough, and fatigue and tiredness is a result of a polluted internal environment. This is the terrain theory. The germs are born in us and from us and are not the cause of disease, but the symptoms of disease. So if you have increased amounts of strep or staph or E. coli, here again, anything from the outside world can only contribute to a state of imbalance, but cannot cause any specific disease. Okay. That means you can be exposed to someone who's symptomatic with SARS or COVID, but not catch anything because you have an environment, an internal environment and protection, which is true immunity. You are managing and maintaining the alkaline design of the internal fluids at a pH of between, here again, we're testing this by urine, with a pH of the urine running between 7.8 to 8.4, but never less than 7.2. And you can get these little testing strips, test your urine, and if your urine pH is below 7.2, you're at risk, you're acidic. You have to be above that particular number for ultimate immunity.
Okay.
Protect your fluids.
Very good. Let's talk about the COVID testing, because I was just raped in my skull last week. It was a horrendous experience, frankly, having something stuck up my brain. What is with these swab tests up the nasal cavity? Can you explain a little bit about this?
Well, here again, I mean, the respiratory system includes our nasal systems, and that is a point of congestion. If you have congestion of the lung, here again, it's going to build up, and you're going to have problems within the nasal cavities. But here again, they're not testing the interstitial fluids, so they're not getting a chemistry or a pH of true alkalinity or true immunity by testing the vascular fluids and comparing them to the interstitial fluids, which is 80% of what is called the extracellular fluids. Extracellular fluids are the fluids outside the cell. 20% is vascular, 80%
I'm
is.
trying to understand if these COVID tests, swab tests,
They're not testing the blood fluids. Right. They're not testing for disseminated intravascular coagulation. They're not testing.
What are they doing?
They're pulling off fragments of RNA or DNA and testing those, and they're putting them in what is called an RT-PCR test, which the inventor of that says this is not to be used for this process. We're talking about the Nobel Prize winner who actually made this statement, Moelis, Dr. Moelis. He said, no, you can't determine any disease. So whatever they're pulling could be associated with your argument that you had with your spouse last night. I mean, that's a far stretch of it, but there's no specific direction. They can call it whatever because nobody really knows. So out of sight, out of mind.
Is there any danger to the test?
Well, the danger is in the diagnosis because it's either false positive or false negative.
Right.
Because they have cutoff points within that testing. And the CDC has suggested 10 different cutoff points. In other words, to stop the testing. Because if it goes too high, guess what? Everybody's positive.
Right, there you go. There you go.
Everybody is positive.
You've described that the exosome and the virus. What's an antibody and an antigen?
Well, and antibodies are chemical compounds, particularly what I refer to as reactive oxygen species, that are released by the lymphocytes. Okay, they're a protein or they're a chemical that are released by lymphocytes to neutralize a particular antigen, which is antagonistic or toxic to the body. Now, here again, we're talking about biologicals, and biological is not where the issue is. All of these symptomologies, from cancer to polio to HIV, even the Spanish flu epidemic, Ebola, SARS, and now a form of SARS, which is COVID, are chemical poisoning, are caused by chemical poisoning, either directly through vaccination or through chemical poisoning from the air or chemical poisoning from what we eat, such as glyphosate. There has to be a poison in there, because just testing RNA fragments doesn't get us to the diagnosis. Right. By swabbing your nose and getting RNA or DNA fragments doesn't tell you anything about a specific disease. Wow. So it's totally invalid. But if you want to go in prior to testing, what you do is you take a product called Nasopure, and I don't sell it. You can get it on the internet, but they have a packet that you put with distilled or purified water. That packet contains sodium bicarbonate. You put it in there, and then you inject sodium bicarbonate through this process, so it goes in one nostril and out the other, and cleanse and purify that environment. I promise you will test negative on the test.
Well, and what about MMS or chlorine dioxide?
Well, chlorine dioxide is a reduced form of a more stable form called sodium chlorite, CHLORITE. So when anybody's talking about chlorine dioxide, that's a very unstable molecule. So it's stabilized with sodium. I wrote one of the first papers in the 90s on sodium chloride, and and sodium chloride is NaClO2. Chlorine dioxide is ClO2. Okay, and so what happens? How do you go from sodium chloride to chlorine dioxide? And then eventually what you really want is oxygen in the reduced form. So the oxygen in the reduced form is not O2, but O1.
Right.
So ozone is O3, atmospheric oxygen is O2, and nascent oxygen, guess what, is released by what? I told you earlier, the lymphocytes. So the lymphocytes are releasing nascent oxygen. The reason why chlorine dioxide or sodium chloride is so effective and is not being used because, number one, you can't copyright or patent it. So it's a general compound that anyone can use. It's just, it's been considered dangerous because you have to know what you're doing. It has to be in a diluted form, no greater than 5%. And you can put it then in another dilution. So you take a 5% solution of chlorine dioxide or sodium chloride, you put it into water, 1 glass of water, of distilled water, preferably 10 drops. That's it. And then you drink that glass of water. And as soon as it hits the hydrochloric acid or lactic acid in the body, the sodium, the bonds of this molecule break apart and release two, because the oxygen is not attached like an O2. The oxygen atoms are attached. But in sodium chloride and chlorine dioxide, they're separate. So you have a chlorine ion and 2 atoms of oxygen. So when it hits the hydrochloric acid or the citric acid, the oxygen releases and it then goes to its opposite polarity because it's negatively charged. It's O minus. And it neutralizes that acid that's causing you to be sick. So what I'm trying to say to you very clearly is you cannot have a sickness without a specific acid. And specific acids like carbon dioxide that causes, toxemia of the lungs and of the blood can cause lots of different hosts of symptomologies. But once you neutralize the chemistry that's going on, the biochemistry, and you're measuring it and checking it, ideally with instruments that Dr. Galena and I have used now over close to 10 years, which is the methodology of our publication, which was just released, on how do I deal with these increased biochemicals from the outside world, the inside world, because when you metabolize, you produce lactic acid. When you overexercise, you feel that acid. Well, if that acid isn't neutralized, it'll cause a sarcoma or a carcinoma. So cancer is a disease of the fluids. It's chemistry that we need to understand here that's affecting the cells. So these are all things, once we understand them, we can protect and prevent a disease by managing and maintaining the internal environment, and by doing a simple test every morning. Take some pH paper, test your urine. If it's below 7.2, you're at risk. If it's between 7.8 to 8.4, which is ideal, then you can rest assured. If you're low, what do? Is you take an alkalizing dose of that water we just talked about, of nascent oxygen, or you can take 2 compounds in a research study that was released in 2016 by the University of Utah on the benefits of mortality of drinking sodium and potassium bicarbonate by reducing mortality, by reducing the risk of disease or death by 25%. And this was in an age group which is targeted the elderly between 70 to 80 years old. Yeah. So they found that those who were taking sodium and potassium bicarbonate lived an additional 25% longer.
Wow, that's huge. So break it down again, if you will. If you were very unlikely, if you were diagnosed with a stage 2, 3, or 4 cancer next Tuesday, what are the 3 protocols that you would instantly default to? The simplest layman's protocol.
Well, hyper means to increase, but I would hyperperfuse. So I would start eating, drinking, soaking, doing rectal infusions of sodium and potassium bicarbonate. You want them aluminum oxide free. That's why I developed the 4 salts, to help people. So the 4 electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium were all included within this process because those are being used up. So if the body doesn't have alkaline reserves, it starts taking them from the bones and the muscles. So it'll take magnesium from the muscles, it'll take calcium from the bones. So we have the incredible shrinking human being who's losing height and their bones are becoming brittle because they're not ingesting. So number 1, I would hyperperfuse the fluids of the body through the orifices of the body with alkalinity using sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Okay, that's number 1. 2, I would start building healthy blood. Okay, and how do I do that? I'd have to change my diet. If you're unwilling to change your diet, then don't listen to what I'm saying, or and because there's no cure out there unless you're willing to change your diet. And that means I'm going to implement what is called an acronym called the COWS program. So I'm going to suggest to you, C stands for chlorophyll, O stands for oxygen and oils, W stands for water, alkaline water, and S stands for sunshine, salt, and sex. Okay. Okay. So if you're not getting in daily love, if you're not getting in sunshine photons, you're not energizing your body, and if you're not getting salt, prepare to die. because salt is the glue that holds you together. So I want you to remember that acronym COWS: chlorophyll, oil, and oxygen, water, and salt. And it's very important that we define, the source of chlorophyll. We don't want chlorophyllin. We don't want copper-based chlorophyll.
The greatest chlorophyll I've ever witnessed was Dr. Galina. I mean, my God, there's some very special stuff there that she's got.
Well, she has two chlorophylls. One is from spinach, and it's a 28% concentration of chlorophyll. Okay, and then she has one that's 100%, and you only take a little bit and put it in it. Yeah,
that's the one.
And that comes from the mulberry leaf.
That's it.
The mulberry leaf chlorophyll, and when you take this, you feel like when you put this into your body, and you only put a little bit into a glass of water, and ideally distilled or purified water. Once you drink that, you feel like somebody just turned the lights on inside your house.
Right, the cells wake up. That's right.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden, wow, I've been waiting for this. I've been, looking for more green in my life, and it's not that easy being green. Ask Kermit the Frog. It's a challenge for those who have been eating, an acidic diet, because there's an addiction to that. Just like, some of the addicting foods, some of the most addicting drugs are all acidic. And the alkaline foods, well, this doesn't taste very good. What happens after about 2 weeks of doing this, your taste buds change. And it's like, you can taste the natural benefits of this. You can feel the natural benefits of this. And all of a sudden, foods that were bland all of a sudden taste sweet to you in a different way.
Right. Beautiful. Well,
there was a third one. Let me tell you the third one. The last one is you have to open up the channels of elimination. So you have to improve circulation and elimination. You've got to defecate to circulate. If you want to energize your body, things need to be moving. And that requires, a little more understanding about, and research. But we've done all that for you. There's 3 basic aminos that are just paramount in improving circulation. One is called L-arginine. The other one's called L-citrulline. And the third one's called L-ornithine. Right. And this is a natural way, as you're taking these aminos with some anti-inflammatories like resveratrol and pycnogenol and magnesium chloride. When you're taking that in combination with D3 at 50,000 international units per day, and you're getting K1 in there, when you're taking this, circulation improves. You start feeling your toes again. You start feeling they're not cold, or you're not feeling that tingling feeling, or so circulation goes to the extremities, and so you start building your microcirculation. So opening up the channels of elimination, improving circulation is probably the third and fourth thing. So hyperperfuse your body with alkalinity, with the 4 alkaline salts.
Yeah.
Start building blood using the COWS program. 3, improve your circulation using amino acids, not anticoagulants, because they're toxic to the membrane and will cause the release of exosomes and damage we don't want to take anything that's going to damage the lining of our body cells. And then open up the channels of elimination. And that may mean you may have to nebulize. That means you may have to use nasopure to flush your sinuses. That may mean you may have to have some colon hydrotherapy infusions to infuse alkalinity rectally into the hemorrhoidal vein, or it may mean taking magnesium oxide to help break down some of the undigested proteins in the 9 yards of the intestine. All of this has been time tested now for 4 decades. This is why we have such a high success, because of these 4 principles that we implement in any symptomology that medical science terms as disease.
Yes.
Once again, there are no diseases. There's only dis-ease symptomologies.
Very good. That's beautiful. Well, thank you for that. You've broken that down into three. Well, with the cows, of course, you've got a whole host there of other pointers. But I've actually, I think I'm ahead of you. I've broken it down to simply one protocol. If I was diagnosed with a stage 2, 3, or 4, I'd simply get on a plane and come to you, Dr. Robert Young. This has been fantastic. And I just want you to, for the last, when it comes to the top of the hour, what I'd like to do is just ask you for 2 minutes, please, to just give us some background on the paper, the scientific paper that you've just published, which I'm really excited to read.
Yes. Well, I tried to use not just words and scientific terms, but pictures that you can look at to relate to really what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about is oxygen deprivation that leads to pathological blood coagulation of the blood, okay? Another medical term is DIC. That's an acronym for disseminated intravascular coagulation that then leads to SARS, that then leads to lung congestion because the blood cannot relieve itself of its waste. That's then being held back and then pushed out into the interstitial fluids. And I didn't say this, but I'll say it now. The interstitial fluids flow around every cell of your body. Every organ and every system, organ system is touched by the interstitial fluids. And this is where the blood and the intracellular fluids eliminate. Their bathroom is the interstitial fluids. It becomes the septic tank. And then from there, it's supposed to be pushed out to the lymphatic system and then out through the pores of the skin or urination, defecation, or respiration. I talk about this in this study that SARS or COVID is nothing more than pathological blood coagulation that's causing oxygen deprivation that leads to interstitial lung disease. Prior to that, I did publish a paper at the end of last year that dealt specifically on interstitial lung disease. And that was with another publishing house. So these are all peer-reviewed journal articles that we can make available to you. You can share this paper if you'd like, right, and let people know. Yeah, let people know that there is a pathology. See, currently SARS is idiopathic. In other words, there's no pathology to it. There's all this, well, it must be this, must be that. Oh, it's exosomes. No, it's virus, even though it hasn't been identified. You know, blah, blah, blah. But here in this paper, I've tried to develop a cohesive, logical, and also scientific validated pathway to what causes these, not diseases, but symptomologies are a result of a decrease in alkalinity in the interstitial fluids of the body. And I make this very bold statement that the genesis of all sickness and disease begins in the interstitium organ, in the interstitial fluid compartments. And the only way that you can measure this is because the urine is a product of the interstitial fluids is to test the pH. This is the test that should be done, not swabbing your nose, not wearing a mask, not social distancing. You know, these are political questions. These are not scientific questions, because if you look at the scientific evidence about all of those requirements, which I believe are political, not scientific, you'll take off your mask. You won't have a test which doesn't prove anything other than what they want to prove. And everything as it relates to SARS is with. It's cancer with SARS. It's cancer with this, with that. You know, here again, we're out of the so-called influenza flu. We still have people dying from sepsis because medical science does not how to control true immunity, which is found in managing and maintaining the alkaline design of the body and understanding that all bodily functions produce acidic waste if not properly eliminated through the 4 channels of elimination, or 5 for women. This is what then builds up that causes what the medical world says are diseases, which are just nothing more than I eat, drink, breathe too much crap disease.
Very good. Dr. Robert Young, Commissioner Dr. Robert Young, thank you very much indeed. Wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, nice talking to you, Sacha. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Always a
Yes.
pleasure for us too, Dr. Young. Lots of great feedback on the thread and the live. This will be posted on the YouTube channel and then on our website, which is reclaimyourlives.com, where everyone can get the archive of all the conversations as well as the resources. I'll put that link in the comments, but we'll include that in our database resource library as well. We'll have you back on soon, Dr. Young, with Dr. Galina.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty consistent.
Ongoing. I do too.
Well, there's one thing that people will find out about me is I like to share, because for me, sharing is caring, and I don't mean to be, sentimental about this, but I really do care. I mean, that's why I got up early this morning, not because I'm not awake at 6 a.m, but I really enjoy sharing, and I hope people enjoy learning, because if you just learn one thing every day, just one new thing, just think how intelligent you're going to be after 1 year, after 2 years, after 3 years. You'll know everything that you need to know, and you can become your own doctor, and you can take care of your own body, because this is the truth. This is your body. This is my body. This is my body. This is my life. And by God's grace, it is my choice. He gave me the free agency. I do not get that from the government. What the government is saying, this is your body, yes. This is your life, yes. But guess what? This is our choice. We're going to mandate things. And this is when we lose our free agency, we have not only lost our freedom, but we've lost it even to the cellular, to the minute level. We've lost everything. People need to understand that we need to protect that freedom. Remember, Sacha, it's your body, your life, your choice. You can use what I've said to help improve the quality and quantity of your life, or you don't have to. I'm not going to force you to do anything other than, educate, research, pray, have faith.
We're jumping off. We're going to go dead in about 30 seconds. So thank you very much indeed. And that is the purpose of reclaimyourlives.com, Reclaim Your Lives. Everything you've said is about consciousness, about sovereignty, and actually about navigating in full pure truth and right action. Thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you, Sacha. All the best. Have a wonderful day. Yes.
You too. We learned more than one thing today, Robert. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
You're
Bye,
welcome.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.